Hey guys, this is going to be a quick video to show you guys how to get started with Octagon so you can get ready for our new online tournament series that'll be starting in a little over a week from now. I'm going to run you through the basics. I'm going to do everything in single player mode so you won't actually see me playing against an actual opponent for the time being. That way if anybody makes mistakes on the opponent's side, we don't get bogged down waiting for them to either make plays or play around and try to reverse mistakes that they've made. Hopefully this video is fairly clear and you guys are able to figure out from everything that's included on how to get set up. And I would encourage you to play a couple of practice matches before we start the actual tournament here in a week or so. So to get started, the first thing you need to do is actually download Octagon. You can see right here I'm on their website right now. It's simply OCTGN.net, and there's a big download button up here at the top. If you click on that, it'll actually take you over to their download page. You can download Octagon and get it installed. It's fairly straightforward. After you have it installed, you'll need to come over here to the challenge boards page. This is where you signed up and where we're going to track all of our matches and who wins against whom and so on. There's some instructions under the information panel now. You can use these to actually get Octagon configured so you can play Game of Thrones in it. I'm not going to run through all these since there's a document linked on here on how to actually get everything set up inside Octagon. That's this link right down here, which is how to install and set up Game of Thrones. And then if you want to use the actual card image files instead of the proxy cards that are included, you can get those image files from here. I would encourage you almost to use the proxies simply because the proxies actually have the full card text on them, whereas the art cards, due to the restrictions that FFG has put in place on Octagon, only include the actual artwork itself and the text boxes are blanked out. So while the proxies aren't as pretty, they actually do have all the gameplay text on them, so you don't have to actually refer back to an outside source. So once you have all that set up and running, you're ready to get started with building your deck. Now, I recommend Card Game DB for deck building. You can also do it on AGOT cards though. Both of them allow you to export decks that you have built within their interface into an Octagon file so you can simply import it into Octagon itself. Now, if you want, Octagon also has a deck builder built into it. It's just not as intuitive or easy to use, in my opinion, as the one that's available from Card Game DB or on AGOT cards. So I'm going to use the Card Game DB one to show you. I'm simply going to pull up one of my saved decks to just show you the process for exporting it over to Octagon. The actual deck building process should be fairly simple, and I imagine all of you can figure that out. So here we're just going to load up, for example, my Martell deck. I built this the other day here in Card Game DB. You can see it breaks everything down by events, attachments, locations, characters, plots, agenda, and house card. So once you have your deck built here in the interface, all you're going to do is come down here to this link in the drop down menu, and you're going to select Save as Octagon Deck File. Once you click on that, you'll be able to name the deck, and we'll just name this V2 since I probably already have a V1 downloaded, and click the process button. This will download your deck and save it to wherever it is you normally download files to within your web browser, and then all you need to do is go grab that deck file out of that folder and move it over to the Octagon deck folder. You can cut, copy, whichever one works for you. In this case, I'm just going to cut it. I'm going to go over to Documents, which is the default store where Octagon stores all of your decks. It's always under My Documents unless you've changed it. Go into Octagon, go under Decks, and then you can either put everything into the root of this decks folder, or you can put it into the actual game itself. See here, you can see I play both Android and Game of Thrones, so there's deck folders for each individual set of decks. So if I go into Game of Thrones, you can see all my current decks in here, and then I'm simply going to paste in the deck I just exported. So you can see my Martell V2 deck is actually now in there. So that's all you have to do to actually get your deck over to Octagon. And then to get started in Octagon, just bring it up. You have to actually register with the site to be able to log in. And then up here, if you go to this play button, so you'll usually be here in the community chat, just go over to play. You can actually start and join games from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a private offline game so that I can kind of show you how to import your deck into the actual game environment and how to interact with it. So if you go to start, you get this little pop-up window that allows you to describe the game, put your username in if there's a game name you want to include. In this case, I'm going to put a password on it and host it on my computer. So I'm going to click host and put in a password real quick. And I'm going to put up here just private deck testing so people know what I'm doing. And then hit start. It'll load up the pregame lobby. And if you're waiting for another player, you'll actually sit here until the player joins the lobby. You'll get a little knocking sound if you have your volume turned up when somebody does. And then you'll simply click start. Make sure when you're playing against somebody else, you use a two-sided table. It is by default checked. I'm going to uncheck that though for the purposes of this demonstration and use a one-sided table and go ahead and start the match. So when you click start, it'll take a second, but this will load you into the actual game board environment, as you can see popping up here on the screen. If you're not subscribed, you'll get these please subscribe reminders. It's up to you if you want to subscribe or not. There's some pretty cool stuff for subscribing, and you can actually see the current feature set they're working on based upon the number of subscribers they currently have. The game reconnects, which was the one we hit at 20%, will be really useful, since right now if you actually get cut off a game, the game's over and you can't actually rejoin and pick it up. You have to start over from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and maximize my screen so I have the full deck surface. There is a way, if you're a subscriber, to actually change your background, but right now it seems like they change about once a month to different houses. Right now we're on House Tyrell. So to get started, you'll want to go ahead and load your deck. So go up here to Game and Load Deck, and go ahead and get into your Octagon deck list, which we found earlier, and select the deck you want to load. So in this case, we'll go ahead and keep with that Martel deck and load it. And you can see it goes ahead and loads my deck. So down here, going from left to right, you have your chat box. You can actually increase the size of this within the game if you want. You also then have your hand. So this the big long bar down here represents your hand. And then to the right of that, you have your actual deck itself. You have your plots, your dead pile, your discard pile. And if you're playing Black Sails, this little button that I moused over right here, this is for your hold. You can actually double click that to expand it, and then you can kind of send it back if you don't need it open. And then on top of that, you have your power, your gold, and this shows you the current count for the current player that you're highlighted over. So if there was another player, there'd be another name here. I'd be able to click on that and see how many cards they have in hand. I'd be able to then look at their dead and discard pile if I wanted to, so on and so forth. And it would tell me how much gold and power they currently have. So Octagon has a lot of context menus and a lot of hotkeys. You can use either one. The hotkeys are generally faster, but until you learn them, you can just use the context menus. Any context menu is accessed by right-clicking. So you can see if I right-click in the gameplay area, I get this context menu, which has things like announcing that you're done with your turn, card actions, exclamations. You can use these to help declare challenges or respond to a challenge if you want. Coins and dice, if you want to either roll a die to see who maybe breaks a tie or flip a coin. Recalculate power totals is important, as sometimes the game won't keep track of renowned characters leaving play, and if you have power on the board and that character leaves play, your power doesn't always update. So you'll want to make sure at the end of every turn, if you're playing with a lot of renown or a lot of power on the board in general, you do a Control R or go ahead and select this recalculate power totals so that your actual power counter down here is actually accurate. And that's it. You can create a note if you want. I don't know why you would though, I guess, simply because you could just chat with the person you're playing with. And then if you move down here, you can see you have a new menu for your hand. You have your random discard, so if you get hit by an intrigue challenge, if you get hit by an intrigue challenge, you just want to discard, multiple cards at once, you can discard many. You can do your mulligan from here. You can pass control. This is how you show other players your hand with the visibility. So if an ability says, reveal your hand to your opponent, you would just temporarily pass a visibility to your opponent by selecting their name from the little drop-down menu over here. And again, you can create a note. Your deck, you have, again, a new context menu. You can shuffle your deck, you can draw on your deck, you can draw many cards from your deck. So for example, your setup hand, you can discard, you can move, and then again you can pass control to or visibility to other people, and then you can actually look at your entire deck. As you can see, Control Shift D is draw many. It's useful to kind of just remember that for your setup hands, that you're going to draw 7 cards. Control D lets you draw in general, and Control S is what lets you shuffle. Your plot deck, same thing. You right click on it. You can randomly select a plot if you get hit by, say, the War of 5 Kings, or then you can just look at your plot deck by mousing over it, going to look at, and then all cards, and you'll see your plot deck pops up, and you can look at your plots that you currently have loaded up in your plot deck that aren't in your used pile. And then you can close it out. And then you get the same thing with your dead pile and your discard pile. And you get the option to reshuffle cards into your deck if you have a card that would necessarily do that. So let's look at a basic setup, right? So I've loaded up the game, my opponent's loaded up their deck, we're ready to start. So I go ahead and drag out my house card, go ahead and drag out my agenda. You can obviously put them anywhere on the board. You know, most people just match wherever you put yours, or you can match wherever they put theirs, whoever goes first. And then you're going to draw your opening hand. So I'm going to use the hotkeys here, but otherwise you could right click on your deck. So the first thing I'm going to do is shuffle my deck with Control S. And then you can see down here it says my deck has been shuffled. And then you can do Control Shift D, and it'll pop up the window, how many cards do you want to draw? Well, it's a setup hand. I'm not playing House of Dreams, so I'm going to draw my 7 cards. So you can see I hit OK, and my 7 cards appear down here in my hand. Now, during setup phase, obviously you want to play your cards face down. So in Octagon, to do that, you simply drag the card out to the board, and as you're doing so, hold down Shift. This will turn the card upside down. So you can see I let go, and my card is now upside down on the board. Now, if you're like me, sometimes you forget how much gold you've already spent or what cards you're setting up, and you want to look at them. Well, the easiest way to do that is to do a Control P. This also works for shadow cards. This basically grants you peek to the cards. Now you can see I can mouse over it and actually see what the card is. So if you have a lot of cards in shadows, you can Control P on each of them, so you don't have to actually flip the card over to see what it is and let your opponent see it too. So I'm going to drag some more cards out here like I would for setup. Obviously this isn't the greatest setup hand for this deck, but I'm just using it for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to grab this next Dornish Fiefdoms, put it face down, the Carrion Bird, and this Maester of Sun. So there's my setup hand. You can see it's all they're all face down and ready to go. So now you can grab multiple cards at once by mousing over and holding down the left mouse button to select cards. And then you can interact with all those cards at the same time. So in this case, my opponent would have played his setup, and now we're ready to flip. So you can either right-click flip cards, or in this case, you can hit F8, which is also flip cards. And then I just move them over to how I would normally have a regular game setup. So characters up top, locations down below, and then we go ahead and draw back up. So I'm going to do a Control Shift D again, so I can draw many cards at once, and I need 4 cards to get back to 7, so I hit OK. And then you can see it replenishes my hand. Then of course you would move to the plot phase. So now you would right-click, look at all cards on your plot deck, and figure out what plot you want to play first. So in this case, I'm going to play Time for Ravens. So again, you can hold down Shift to put the card upside down and wait for your opponent, and then you can flip that card over, and you start your plot phase. And from here on out, the game would play just like any other Game of Thrones game. There's no real automation in the game yet for actual triggers and effects and things of that sort. Some people have been asking for it on Card Game DB for the guy who actually designs the Octagon software for Game of Thrones, but there's no news yet if he's actually going to include any or not. But there are some things to help you out. So, for example, I want to bring attention to a card in play. So in this case, I want my opponent to understand that I have a Time for Ravens in play, which actually has a when revealed effect. So if you hold down Shift and you left-click on a card, you'll get this target. This brings attention to the fact that you want somebody to look at this card that's being targeted. So in this case, I want my opponent to see that I need to go fetch a Raven card out of my deck. So I go over here to my deck, I left-click, I look at all cards, it brings open my deck, and I find the Raven that I want. So in this case, I'm looking for Black Raven. I grab them, put them on the deck surface, the card surface rather, so everybody can see that that's what I got because I have to reveal it, and then I put them back into my hand. And you saw when I revealed my deck there, before I closed it, I actually used this close it and shuffle button. This actually goes ahead and shuffles your deck instead of having to first close it and then shuffle it. So now it's already been shuffled once, I won't do it again, and I'll close it out. And then you can shift left click again to get rid of the target. And then you go on and so forth. So now it's time to count gold. So there's 2 ways to count gold in the game. There's a way of putting gold actually on your plot card, and then there's the counters down here. I prefer the counters simply because it allows you and your opponent to actually see how much gold each one has. If you put it on your plot card up here, it doesn't actually show up in the gold counter down here. So I try to refrain from actually putting my gold on the plot card just to make it easier for my opponent to understand how much gold I have left if they're trying to figure it out. So in this case, I just click up, 2, 3, 4, because I have 4 gold, and I'm ready to start my turn. Now, let's say I have to actually show my opponent that I'm using an ability such as Stealth. So in this case, I'm just going to put the Red Viper over here and pretend that he's my opponent's card for the time being. Now let's say I need to initiate a military challenge and I want to stealth the Red Viper. Well, I could type down here, military challenge, stealthing Red Viper with Carrion Bird. That's a lot of typing. Instead, you can left click on the card and then drag while holding down Shift, and actually point that card at a different card to say, I'm doing some ability on this card that's going to target this character. So in this case, your opponent would look at the card and say, oh, well, he's probably doing that for stealth, or you could even just simply type stealth down in the text box as well. Now, for declaring challenges as well, the way you'd want to do this is you can either type down here, so for example, if I was military, which I'd have to do with the bird, I would say mil down in the text box, and I would kneel my bird. You can also right-click on the card, go to challenges, and say military challenge, which puts this nice red border around the card that says, hey, this guy's doing a military challenge, and then you shift, click, and drag to say I'm stealthing the red viper. Now, you can also do that with hotkeys. So as you can see when you go to the challenges menu, you have Control M, Control I, Control P, and Control N. Each one of these represents the individual challenges. M for military, I for intrigue, P for power, and then N is for none or remove. So let's say I win this challenge, which I obviously would since I can't actually technically stealth the red viper, but let's assume that he's not immune to the events. My opponent kills the character and is unable to oppose it, so I claim a power. So to claim power, you simply come down here and you increment your power counter by 1. Or you can do it on your house card. Unlike your gold, when you actually put power on your house card like this, it does actually increment the power counter down below, as you can see. So you can see as I add 1 and take 1 away, it actually goes from 1 to 2 and back from 2 to 1. You can do the same thing by putting power on a character too. If you put it on there, you can see my power counter goes up. Now to add power, you right click, go to power markers, and add or subtract power, or as you can see, you can use F1 and F2. I find F1 and F2 to be much faster, but if you like to right click and do it, you can do it that way as well. And then you continue playing the game. There's no real difference beyond any of the things I've just shown you. It's just like playing a game in real life. I would always encourage you to get on voice chat with your opponent if you can. Skype's good for that, and I'm thinking about actually setting up a voice server for something like TeamSpeak or Ventrilo, so people can actually get on that and play too. But I've found Skype to be fairly useful. So if your opponent wants to talk on voice, then you can both hop on Skype and you can interact that way as well. But you would just play the game normally, and the same win conditions apply as everything else, and just play through the game. If you ever have any questions or you make mistakes, just talk to your opponent and they'll be able to help you out, and you can work through them. The common mistakes I've seen are people, same things you would make in a regular game. You ignore the cards you have on the board that would say give you more initiative on your plot, or you have more gold, or you forget the fact that it's summer and so you didn't count an extra gold. And a lot of people are pretty nice and will let you go back and redo that action if it hasn't been too many actions since then, just like they would in a regular game. But the whole point is just to have fun and be able to play. So that's it, guys. That shows you how to play. Once you're done, you'll just report your win-loss on the challenge board, and everybody will get rolled into the next bracket. Remember, you're going to have a week to play each game, and if everybody gets done before that week's out, we'll go ahead and assign the next matchup so you guys can keep on playing, and that'll do it. So if you need to reset a game, by the way, or end the game, let's say I've gotten to 15 power and I've won, you can come up here to go to game and go to reset, and this will actually wipe the entire board. Alright guys, that's it. If you got any questions, go ahead and shoot me a message and I'll try to help you out. And if you want to play some practice games, just hit me up next week and I'll hop on and we can play together. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one. Bye.